Welcome to the Pipe Podcast. My friend and owner of Real Experiences, Bryan Coley, is on with us today. Just in time for the Oscars. We're going to talk about that today. It's going to be exciting. I'm your host, Cris with the Pipe Podcast. Obviously, we talk about sales process, sales initiatives, sales prospecting, and experiences. And Bryan, I'm just so glad to have you on today. It's going to be fun. We're right on the heels of the Oscars, and I want people to know and understand a little bit about what you're doing with Real Experiences. So let's just jump right into it. Bryan, tell our listeners and watchers, what you do with Real and how you make it happen, and just give them a little background as well, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, I graduated NYU Film School, worked for Turner Broadcasting for about 12 years. Quit and started a nonprofit theater company, which tells you how wonderful my wife is. But I was really passionate about story and passionate about the playwrights at first and then screenwriters and helping them write their work. And why this is relevant to what I'm doing today is that we used to ask writers what moved them in order to help them find the script that only they could write. So what kind of works of art moved them? And quickly that became their top 10 movies. And so a long time ago, we used to mine their top 10 movies to find the themes that they should write about as the script that only they could write. Well, fast forward, I end up making a movie. I'm in the edit suite, bored out of my mind. And I decided to try these methods we were using with writers, with kind of normal people. And it blew up. People were changing their lives, believe it or not, based on the insights they were finding in their top 10 movies. And so it was just like 30 years of working in story, oil well, just spewing out of different ways of looking into the movies and different lenses is what we call them. And then, ultimately different audiences. And finally we found a really sweet spot within corporate America where we have been working, just helping teams, develop their people and, really find their story inside their movies and be able to share their story in a meaningful way. I compare it to National Treasure. If you've ever seen National Treasure, Nicolas Cage finds that underneath the Declaration of Independence, been there all along, up underneath our noses is a treasure map. And so he does what I would not recommend. He steals the Declaration of Independence, but he finds these cool glasses that have different lenses to read the map. That sends them on a fun journey to find some cool treasure. And that's kind of a metaphor for what we do. We believe that in your top 10 movies is this treasure map. And all we do is just kind of give you the lenses to be able to read the map, send you on a fun journey, hopefully, to find some cool treasure. So that's kind of Real in a nutshell. That is
really, I'll just say,
really puns
cool.
Are coming. I can feel we're going to have puns all day long.
That's right. That's right. I'll tell you, and I've seen it. Like, I've been a part of it. I've seen it. I've been part of a Real experience, and it's incredible. And the way that, I love what you said, what moves them, what moves people. And one of the things that I talked about just in a training this morning, I said, you have to be passionate about what you're doing, what moves you, what drives you, what are those, even those experiences that you've had, or what inspires you to do something more, to be a little different, right? And so it's just so interesting, the whole concept of Real. And, a lot of times, Bryan, when organizations are trying to figure out, okay, what's the next corporate event that we should do, right? They're choosing between, I don't know, a golf place, or they're choosing between the bowling alley, or they want to do something like that. So let's really unpack that and talk about what makes Real, different. What makes this experience different than your traditional, hey, we're just going to have a employee outing, drink some drinks, throw some balls down in the gutter, and probably, you may or may not even engage with others within the organization at a high level. You may just stay within your own kind of comfort zone and your own kind of pod of people that you always engage with anyway. So let's talk a little bit about what makes that different.
Yeah, a long time ago, I had to figure out whether I use the word team building because that's what everybody thinks of when they think of us. I kind of changed it to team development because I really think that what we combine is the fun, so you don't have to choose between fun and insight. Like you said, most people choose between the bowling alley or the personality assessment or some sort of workshop. And we kind of bring both of those things together. And ultimately, I think everybody is just trying to find a way to connect again, right? We're coming out of the pandemic. We have this deep desire to figure out how do we connect as team members, as people, just from just stepping back, just as society, we're trying to figure out how do we connect again. And so I just feel like, there has to be the fun element of it, but there also has to be something meaningful so that we can begin to know each other again and see each other again. And that's kind of what we do. Is I feel like our brand is both being able to see yourself inside your movies, which is great. That's sort of what you get with your Myers-Briggs and your DISC and your all the things that you could choose. Like, we're another option for that. But ultimately, the thing that I kind of live off of is whenever somebody's watching a clip of a movie within a real experience and the person next to them goes, "Oh my gosh, you are so Braveheart. That is just totally you." That person just feels so seen inside, right? And It's just, the movie character is just a proxy for them. But, and you'll have people who'll go, "Well, I'm not really Braveheart, like I'm really not, like I didn't save Scotland," that kind of thing. And people are like, "No, but you saved this." And, and they speak life into each other as team members. And we've just seen that over and over again, where that feeling of feeling seen just increases engagement. It increases trust. It increases collaboration, all the things that we need to be productive. But it's the soft skills that are so important. I think especially now that leaders have to build into their people.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so important. It's so important. So let's go a little deeper into the culture of the organization. Like, how important is it, Bryan, to make sure that you're continuing to drive the right culture in your organization, that you're continuing to do those types of things, and really to help the company and to help, even you personally? What does that look like in your world?
Yeah. I never set out to be someone who's doing like emotional intelligence in the corporate world or something like that. Like, I'm just a movie guy, right? So you're asking these questions of a movie guy, but at the same time, I've spent 10 years like really seeing different organizations come through here, right? And different levels of success and, different ways in which people are impacted. And we get to see people leave our space with such a huge value. And usually the distinction there is you have a team leader who really, really wants to really invest in their people in a way that, let me say it differently. What they're trying to do is get to the work. So that's the biggest thing. Like, their goal is, I need to get to the work, but I know I have to get to the work through people. So how do we get to the work through people? Well, the best way to do that is allow people to really, the space that they're going to spend their lives in, most of their life is working in this space. I need to make sure that they feel like they feel known and seen. And especially with a new generation, that is a high value, that they come in feeling known and seen. And so I believe hopefully what I'm answering your question, which is, I think the best team leaders we've seen come here see the value of building a team culture and a culture at large that's based on, I'm going to use the word, is kind of vulnerability, but I'm going to call it appropriate vulnerability, which is the ability for, what we kind of do is give people the knob of vulnerability in their hands. So if they want to tell, how their life intersects with this movie and just be vulnerable, then, and cry over Dumb and Dumber or Anchorman, which just happened, then they can do that, but they can open up and do as much of that vulnerability as they want. It's not forced or anything like that. And it's still movies, we're still talking about movies. So that culture of, and I'm not trying to get all Brene Brown on you, but that culture of vulnerability, I think is very important. Again, specifically now as we're coming out of COVID.
That's really good. That's really good. And so, that also kind of leads me to this next question is, how do what does a typical, and I know everyone is different, right? Every experience that you have, even though you offer different experiences. And if you go to the website, you'll see there's lots of different offerings, for the way that your organization delivers these experiences, right?
Yeah.
But when you offer, how does it like tell our viewers and listeners, like, how does it kind of work? I mean, we get into a room, or we get into an interactive, in some interactive way, and just kind of step them through what that process is kind of like in your typical experience, if you want.
Yeah, good question. Because that's really what people usually get the concept, but then they don't know how it's going to go. Are we going to come in here and watch the movies or something? Which is, there's days in which I go, let's just turn on this movie and just watch it.
Right.
But what happens is I'll give you our bread and butter kind of experience, which is called storyboard. Storyboard is almost a full day experience. We have half day experiences. We have full day experiences. We have like a storyboard light, which is a half day experience. We have DEI experiences that are, like series. So we have all kinds of experiences, but storyboard is kind of the one that most people come in and do with a team. So what happens is, people will download our app. We have a real app, and they'll submit their favorite movies. Our app is kind of designed to help them discover their favorite movies. So each person will download their app and submit their top 10 movies. Mm-hmm. I also will have a pre-brief with the team leader and get their development goals for each person on the team. So that's sort of a pre-brief that I do before storyboard. That's the name of the experience. And then folks will come in. We'll do a nice icebreaker game for sure. And then we'll rotate through what we call different lenses. So let's say it's a team of, I'll just keep it small, but let's say it's a team of 9. Then you're going to rotate with 3 people through the lens of character. And we're going to look at the concept of character in your movies. We're going to be asking you questions about your movies, not about the movies. It's not me showing you a movie and saying, what do you think? It's me bringing out questions and bringing out insights from your movies. We'll watch trailers. We'll just ask deeper questions about that character. Then we'll rotate, and you'll be with different people, and we'll look through the lens of desire. Then we'll rotate again and look through the lens of conflict. And then we'll rotate again and look through the lens of change. Those 4 lenses, believe it or not, form what is a story, who, your character, what they want, what comes against them, and how they change and grow. So, we have all those insights from your movies. So we've been in your movies, and then we do a little Jedi mind trick, which is kind of a surprise, where we take all those insights and just basically say, hey, we were talking about the character, but now let's talk about, maybe does this insight apply to your life? And believe it or not, it's usually just, the intersection is just incredible and transcendent almost. It's just, one of those surprising moments, excuse me, whenever people are like, how in the world did this come out of this movie?
Right.
And then, there's just that opportunity for people to, like I said, share and see each other and affirm each other. And then post experience, I usually get with the team leader and I say, hey, did you see this? Did you see this? Did you see this? With their insights in relationship to their development goals. So it's very designed from a team leader perspective, definitely to have some pull through coaching, as well as, I can do coaching with individuals. I've done that before, where maybe there's a conflict within a team. I've even stepped into that with their movies, if you can believe it or not.
Right.
So just a lot of, that's our storyboard. But like I said, we have all kinds of different experiences. Probably my favorite these days is our DEI experiences, where we're helping people who may not be able to verbally articulate, what's going on in them, like these hard subjects that we have, which are hard verbally to get out. But if you have a stand-in of a motion picture, it takes the emotional weight off of specifically like people of color, where they don't have to go back into their trauma again. Instead, they can just push all that into their movie and go, okay, well, let me explain it through this character here. And it just allows us to, what I call it is visual articulation. the ability to articulate things visually versus having to articulate with them with words, when words can kind of divide us and make everything political and all this kind of stuff. So,
right. It's so good, Bryan. I mean, it's so good. I mean, and when I went through it, I'll just tell, those that are watching and listening, it was eye-opening. And those that I participated with, I learned so much about the team that I was with at that time that I had no idea. Like there are things that came out that I had no idea. And I was able to connect with those people at such a higher level. And I'm telling you, the experience is exactly as coined. I mean, it is a real experience and it is so unique. And some of these trusted advisors and companies, I mean, that you've done business with and for, I mean, Fortune 100, Fortune 50 companies, I mean, are amazing. And you have had the opportunity to impact, a lot of these companies in such a positive way. Yeah. And some of the reviews of the company have been tremendous. I mean, life changing. Like sometimes when you read a review, you're like, oh yeah, ABC company, they did a great job and they met all of the service criteria and they, and I would definitely recommend them to one of my friends. I mean, the reviews that you have with this organization are so unique. And I mean, they're they warm your heart. I mean, when you're reading some of these reviews, it's like, it had an impact to me personally that's going to change my life going forward. I mean, going to change the way that I engage with other people within my team. It's going to change the way that I manage. I mean, it's so unique. I mean, I could go on and on because I just think it,
I may have to get you to be my sales guy someday.
I think it's crazy good. Okay. So let's back up a second. So now when we talk about, like the experience themselves and those that were listening and watching, now they know that, hey, this is kind of how it works. So when you, at the end of the experience, and I hope I didn't ruin it for you, but at the end of the experience, what are the 3 things or at least a few things that you would like, somebody to walk away with, or that you've seen, this transformation in those that have participated? What are those things? What does that look like, Bryan?
Yeah. Let me tell you a story. That's probably the best way to do it. So I had a team leader and she was going to do storyboard, the experience I explained a minute ago. And, so I had this team leader and she was, had this goal for this one person who had been in the company for over 15 years, let's say. And so her goal was that she really wanted him to see himself as a mentor. Like there was some disconnect going on with inside of himself and she couldn't figure it out. Like she was just like, I don't know what's going on. He's been here so long, but he just does not see himself as a mentor on this team. So that's her goal. That's what she would love to see. He comes into the real experience. And one of the lenses we have is conflict. And it's designed around the idea of looking at inner conflict in the character. So we designed this question and he responds and with, his answer and everything like that. And then we're in the presentation mode and we're presenting this one lens. And his lens is the insight is, what is the lie that would take out this character? Like if you were trying to if you're the bad guy, what is the lie you want to tell this character? And so he reads the lie out loud and he says, you're behind the times. You're kind of a dinosaur. You're no longer a part of the cool cats and the industry is kind of moving on without you. Those were kind of the insights that he was getting. Well, I asked him, I said, what movie is that from? And he said, Anchorman. And if you think about Anchorman, and if you were a bad guy trying to take out Ron Burgundy in Anchorman, if you remember the movie at all, television is moving on, and it's actually having women, anchor women, and he's like, oh my gosh, he feels he's no longer part of the cool cats. The industry is moving on without him. He's, ancient and he's just a dinosaur, right? So that truly is a lie that you would tell Ron Burgundy, right?
Right.
And this guy is kind of, he's got all kinds of like Chevy Chase movies on it. It's all the vacations and stuff. So he's a light guy, he's not like, The Godfather or something like that. So anyway, he tells us, this lie. And all I do is just ask the question, like, how does that intersect, your life? And he goes, well, and he looks at his team, and his team, by the way, is a bunch of millennials and Gen Zers, right? And he goes, I kind of feel like that's who I am on this team. Like, the industry's moving on, I'm just the dinosaur in the room. These are the cool cats, and I'm not a part of them, right? And he's vulnerable enough to say that in front of them. And of course, what happens? It's classic, like all of these, his team members are like, oh my gosh, no, gosh, you have so much to offer us. You've been here, blah, blah, blah. And so in that moment, Ron Burgundy creates this massive change and shift in this guy when he walks out the door. In fact, the next day he goes to his team leader and he says, that was monumental for me. Like, I feel like now I have something to contribute to this team. And so that very thing that leader was wanting, which was for him to see himself as a mentor, happened through Ron Burgundy and Anchorman, and through a real experience. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of what is the output, right? Of something, of an experience like real.
It's so good. It's so good, Bryan. Thank you so much for sharing. So Mark Fonseca, thank you, Mark, for being on. I know you're a big fan. You've gone through it as well. And we're just so glad that you're on today. Have you looked at potentially using Reel in the matchmaking vertical? I mean, I don't control the questions here, Bryan. They just come in, but
and the answer is yes. But I would have to partner with some like Match.com or something like that and say, well, we think we got a secret sauce here of being able to. But let me just tell you, we had a love experience. And it was my favorite experience. And we brought married couples in and we would look at the concept of love in their top 10 movies. And it was amazing. It helped my marriage, actually. Like, it transformed my marriage, being able to articulate things that we wouldn't have been able to articulate with the movies. And for that experience, I was like, oh my gosh. And there was a statistic that I found out that if you watch movies and talk about them with your spouse, that you have, I think it was like 65 or 75% chance of not getting a divorce, So it was like major. And these were movies in the experiment, this was the movies that they chose for them, much less the movies that were actually a part of a person's heart, their top 10. So I do think there's something there. And I do think that there's a dating app too, of like, hey, you got 5 of your movies and I have 5 of those movies. So maybe there's something we can do here. But I need some controlled experiment on that one. So.
Yeah, I got it. That's a great question. Thank you.
It is a good question.
Thank you, Mark Fonseca, for saying it. Okay. So let's pivot a little bit. Hey, we've got something big happening on Sunday. We've got the right?
Yeah.
And I want you to tell, this is another like kind of piece that you do every year, right? Yeah. Right around Oscar time, you're doing this. And, I'd love for, the listeners and the viewers to hear a little bit more about what you do, as it pertains to the Oscars and all the Oscar nominated films and those types of things. And you've had some enlightened experience by doing this through the years that you have. And we can even go back to pre-COVID 2020. You tell that story, which is amazing. Yeah. But if you wouldn't mind, like, just, sharing a little bit about how you started to focus on the Oscars and how you started to do this piece of it as well.
Yeah, this is the part where everybody now knows I'm crazy, in that moment, right? So I thought about, like, if I was looking at people's top 10 movie lists and there was such a surprise element to it and such incredible insight that were coming out of this, I call it almost like a palette of parables for people, right? Just a palette of stories that move people. I thought, well, what if you did this on a macro level? Like, what if we looked at it from the standpoint of America, and looked at it culturally, would this tell us anything? So I tried the box office And that was just like nothing, like there wasn't anything there I didn't really see. But then I tried the nominees for Best Picture for the Oscars, and it was just like lighting up. Like there were just these wonderful themes that were coming out. And then all of a sudden it kind of lit up in me. I was like, oh, of course, if you take commerce out of the equation, which is what you do with most of the Oscar films, that's why nobody goes and sees them. But anyway, if you're making art for art's sake, usually that is because there's something in that artist is trying to say something,
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people go, well, it's probably just Hollywood liberal agenda, blah, blah, blah. But if you take all 10 of the movies, almost like what we do here at, or all the nominees, almost like what we do here at Reel with the 10 movies, then there's the control is not in the filmmaker's hands, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's this palette and there's themes that start running across all these 10 movies. And so that's what I started to do, was look at these common themes. And what was crazy was, as soon as I kind of brought out the themes, I started to see them playing out in culture over the next year, or over the next couple of years, and it was just absolutely amazing. I was kind of mind blown because it makes sense because, usually art and entertainment is upstream from all the other aspects of culture, that we look at, all the other institutions. And so it makes sense that if you're making things that don't have a commerce element to them, then maybe these things are somewhat prophetic in their nature, like they're telling us where we're foreshadowing where we're headed. So yeah, I just started doing that year after year, and I just started finding these crazy things would just, it was just like these movies were thematically, kind of foreshadowing our story and narrative as a country. And so, probably the most dramatic one was 2020. There was some dramatic ones before that, but 2020 was probably the most dramatic, in which I stood up in February. Pinewood Studios, they used to have a gathering there on Oscar Sunday, and I would go and kind of lay out what I was seeing in the Oscars each year. And so that year in February, the pandemic was not even a blip on our radar as a country at that time. But all of the movies, and again, you have to think about these movies were made, years in advance, released the year before. They were conceived way earlier than that. So you're talking about, it took me about 8 years to make a movie. These are a lot. It takes a long time. So all these movies coming together, and they're all saying that we need to test our devotion to each other in order to figure out whether we're going to be our brother and sister's keeper. All the movies are saying this, common theme of testing your devotion, whether you're going to be your brother and sister's keeper. And then, of course, we get COVID, and then suddenly we're having to test our devotion between money and people, right? And mask wearing and all these things that we're testing our devotion to our freedoms and people. And then George Floyd happens in the summer, and now we're testing our devotion to our fellow brother and sisters of color. And then of course, the craziness of the election. I thought it would have something to do with the election, but I didn't see January 6th happening, where we're like, oh my gosh, we're really testing our devotion to information and all this kind of stuff, and whether we're going to still stay together as a country. Like, it was just craziness, right? And so that theme just played out in spades over that year. And it kind of helped me frame in my mind, like most people are like, well, what do I do with this, Bryan? And for me, I was able to walk through that year going, okay, I'm wearing a mask because I'm trying to be my brother and sister's keeper. Like, it framed the right reality for me as I moved through that year, if that made sense.
Yeah.
It just really helped me. And I think from a business perspective, from a person, from any institution, anything like that, I just really think if you leaned into the Oscars and really kind of leaned into what these narratives that are coming out of or the themes coming out of these Oscars, then you might actually be, ahead of the curve when it comes to how to posture yourself for what may happen. Not predictive. I don't want to ever think I'm doing tarot cards or fortune telling. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just talking about there's kind of a theme we're going to be walking through together.
Yeah.
Let's be ready for that theme, if that makes sense.
It's so good. It's so good. All right. So here's the $100 question. People say $1 million, but mine's worth about 100. But here's the $100 question. So what themes, do you see coming out of, this year's Oscars? Like what are some of the commonalities that you see?
Yeah, I'll give you a sneak peek, but I want you to come, and we're going to have at 6:30 on Sunday night, Oscar Sunday, right during the red carpet. We're actually going to unpack this, with speakers and all kinds of things. But the biggest theme that is in all 10 movies, all 10 nominees, is a theme of barriers and boundaries. We're still asking the question. All the movies are kind of still asking the question, can we be a we, can we come together? Right. So that's still a question that we're asking, that we've been asking through several years of Oscars. Yeah. But the answer this year is dealing with our barriers and our boundaries. And, for me, I think that this is just so appropriate because we had all these barriers that were meant to love our neighbor, to really help protect our neighbor during COVID. Now I believe the Oscars are kind of telling us, hey, we got to look at those barriers when it comes to relationships and how we might still be relationally social distancing, how there still might be like plastic walls between us, like with relationships, or feet apart with us. And then, this may be a little predictive, so I don't know if this is true or not, but I think the boundary side of it is, I think we got to finally get control of these things that own us, that are keeping us from relationship. Those things that are, like keeping us from freedom and agency and being able to, really not feel owned by something. And I hate to say it, but when I walk out in the world, and I do it myself, if I'm in a lobby, I tend to grab my phone and go, well, I can check email versus talk to the stranger next to me, and I think that maybe we have to reframe this as we're kind of owned by these things that are keeping us from agency, from freedom, from relationship but every time I say this, I feel like an old guy in the room. And, so I know I'm speaking like an old guy right now. I want to paint a picture of more of the concept of, there's several movies that give you a really good idea of this. I would say Elvis is probably, ironically enough, the movie that I would attach to this, in which Elvis is kind of caught in this trap where he can't seem to get out and have his own agency and ownership because this guy, the Colonel, is helping and managing him and selling him and promoting him, but he's also keeping him and owning him and, in taking his agency away. And of course, we know what happens to Elvis. Tragically, as we see that through the movie, and their relationship is kind of like you wish you could scream to Elvis, set a boundary over this thing that owns him. And I know this is going to be wacky, but I kind of put my cell phone as that Colonel.
That's interesting.
In Elvis. And I go, I want to be able to own my own music, and like Elvis, music being a metaphor for anything in my life, Right. I don't want to be owned by this thing. Does that make sense at all?
It sure does. I mean, it sure does. And you made a little joke about it. You're like, okay, now this is typically when I start to talk about this is typically when the audience or the viewers, the listeners, this is when they think
I'm on a live stream. We are in right now. Like,
this is where they think I'm crazy. But I'll tell you, if you haven't figured it out, those that are listening and watching, this guy is brilliant. He is brilliant. And I don't say that about too many people, but I'll tell you this. I mean, what you've done with the concept of real, what you've done with this organization, and how you've impacted some of these other big name clients is just nothing short of amazing. And, I know you're...
I'm a big fan of Cris, by the way, too. I can sit here.
Thank you. But I know, and I know you put a lot of that, you put a lot of that faith in the guy upstairs, and that he's brought you to these opportunities. But it just means the world to me to have you on today, Bryan. So if you're okay, I'd like to jump to the Sales Arbiter 7.
I'm ready.
And that if this tells you what a movie fan I am. I love the movies, have always loved the movies. Just something that it's also an escape for me. and just get lost in the characters. And so when I developed the Sales Arbiter 7, I did that with my friend James Lipton in mind. And this is from, when he was, when he was running that piece, the Inside the Actor's Studio, and he would interview, stars, and he would ask them at the end of their interview, he would ask them a series of questions. Yeah. And so I based the Sales Arbiter 7 a lot on the way that James Lipton would ask these questions. Yeah. And I can't do it as well as
I was going to ask you, can you do the accent maybe?
I wish I could, with the little glasses and, I'm just not that good at it. But I base these questions just to give our audience maybe just a little preview of things that they might not know about, Bryan Coley. So if you're willing to participate in that, I think we should just go with it.
Yeah.
All right, let's do it.
Let's do it. Feel free.
So what is your favorite word, Bryan? What's your favorite word?
Oh, wow. I'm really fond of, it's a tie right now between two words that are similar. So I hope I can get away with that. I really like the word transcendence and wonder, like that concept. Like to me, those are the words that really speak to me. Transcendence and wonder. Yep.
That's good.
Do I need to explain myself, or is it just like,
I think you should. Explain yourself, Bryan Coley.
Well, I am a person of faith, so I'm always looking for those moments of transcendence in our world where it's just like unexplainable. And I feel like that's why I do Reel too, is I get to see those moments of transcendence where it's like, it's sort of unexplainable. Just like the 2020 Oscars. It's like, there's something transcendent about this. And I feel like in our world right now, with us depending so much on science for every kind of solution, I think we're losing a sense of wonder and that sense of transcendence, right? I'm a big Disney fan, Disney World fan, and I go there like a little kid, and it's because I just, if there's a boat, this guy, and it literally happens because I'm staying at Fort Wilderness, where there's a boat that comes to Fort Wilderness, and it has a whistle that blows in the morning that I hear, and I'm like beckoned to go get on this boat to go to a magic kingdom. Come on now, I'm going to that. So, to me, that's kind of, maybe it's the storyteller in me, or maybe it's just the person of faith that I am, that I just really want more wonder in my world. And I want more wonder for other people, too, so that they just don't get bogged down in this kind of isolation and loneliness and disillusionment that can be this life at times. So. It's
so good. Thank you, Bryan. And so let's move to this next. What is your least favorite word?
Least favorite word. Oh man, least favorite word. I think it might be, well, the first thing that came to my mind was COVID, but, the least favorite word, I don't have a good answer for that. I probably right now it just comes to my mind COVID, just because.
Yeah, that's okay. That can be your least favorite. It's a lot of people's least favorite.
Yeah. I think I had a thought of a word, but I don't remember what it is right now. But yeah, sorry.
That's okay. We'll go with that one. All right. What is something that could make your day?
Something that can make my day. It has to have something to do with my wife. That's for sure. Oh, it's probably my wife laughing at my jokes. That makes my day, because whenever I can laugh with my wife and I made her laugh, it doesn't happen that often. That's the problem. When you're married, your spouse doesn't laugh at you that as much as they used to. Right.
Right.
If I can make her laugh, then man, that is a really good moment.
That's good. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
So what is something that could ruin your day?
Oh, it probably has something to do with my wife too, right?
It might.
Yeah. It probably has something to do with my wife too. I think probably ruin my day would be just feeling like I was misunderstood, maybe, someone told me recently that, there's a new phrase. It's not FOMO, like fear of missing out, but it's fear of, it's FOMO, is fear of making a mistake, or what is it? Fear of
misunderstanding?
No, it's not misunderstanding. It's fear of messing up. Fear of messing up.
There we go.
But I think I would change it to fear of misunderstanding, which is my FOMO, which a bad day would be that, let's say here at Real, that, people just didn't get it. And like maybe I pushed in a little too hard, or maybe I asked a question that was a little too much. I don't know, but my intentions were not felt, if that makes sense. Right. That would be a really bad day,
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Good. What sound or noise do you love?
I think I'll go back to that boat whistle at Walt Disney World.
Yeah, you like that one. Yeah,
that one actually is actually a sound that I really truly love. Is hearing that boat whistle and going, okay, Magic Kingdom, here we come. So
that's it. That's good. And what sound or noise do you hate?
Gosh, I wanted to hear what other people have said, because obviously there's the scratch on the chalkboard kind of, generic kind of stuff.
Sure.
But sound I hate. Oh gosh. I think it probably it has something to do with my car. I can imagine it has something to do with my car. Because that usually is so stressful to me to think, okay, here comes that noise, or what is that noise? So probably has to do with my car, which I seem to always be having that.
Some grinding or something falling off. Like no one likes that.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. I can tell you the noise specifically. Oh my gosh. I can tell you this noise that happened. I was pulling out, again, it's sort of Disney specific. I was pulling out of Disney's Fort Wilderness, which is the campground there. Mm-hmm. And I had not put my camper on the ball of the toe, the toe ball. It was on top of it. And so I turned out and my trailer went this way and I went this way. And that sound I will never forget, because it was like, oh my gosh, my whole trailer is gone.
Oh my goodness.
It wasn't, but boy, that sounded like that. So
yeah, that's not fun. That's not fun. All right. Last one. What profession other than your own would you have liked to attempt?
Oh, I'm going to keep on the Disney thematic here. I would be an Imagineer for sure. Like I would have gotten a little bit more of the Georgia Tech kind of skill set, along with my creative set to combine and blow up the world. So, not literally blow up the world, but like do cool things. So probably be an Imagineer would be cool. Although there's days in which I just want to put that orange apron on and go to work at Home Depot and just call it a day, I know it's not probably like that, but it would just be so great to just be like, oh yeah, I can help you with your plumbing, even though I don't know anything about plumbing, but just to wear that, I kind of have an envy for that orange apron every once in a while. So yeah.
That's great. That's great. Brian, I can't thank you enough for being on today. So before we go, let's make sure we tell people, how do they get in touch with you? How can they experience a real experience? What's the best way for them to get in touch with you so they can get this implemented, or this process, or just have an experience with their team, and their organization?
Yeah, the best thing is realexperiences.com, and it's REEL experiences.com. And there's a place on there that you can press and say, get real. And, it'll, you can fill out an inquiry, and then I'll be back in touch with you, and we'll kind of explore what your goals are and how much time you can give me and how many team members you have. And we can just customize an experience, around your needs. So that is best way to contact us.
That's great. That's great. Well, Brian, I can't thank you enough. I'm going to be enjoying seeing you this weekend, and obviously we're going to be talking Oscars. But I always close every episode like this. But thank you for being on. And listen, for those that were listening and watching today, keep selling and have fun doing it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Crispin.